welcome in everyone to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Friday, December 13th around here, and we have a great show for you today. Bill Belichick has officially been hired at UNC, so let's look ahead a little bit. Let's look at 2025. Let's look at that schedule, give you guys an idea of what he's capable of, some of the pitfalls of what that is, and then what's the expectation as he heads into year one. Obviously, they have changed, but how much have they changed, at least in year one? Then we'll get to the CFP tiers. I'll talk about which teams I think can actually win a national title, talk about which teams are very dangerous, one team that probably just needs a Herculean effort from one guy, and I think we all know who I'm talking about. Then we'll get to the CFP X Factor players. I'll get to all the players from every single team that I want to see a lot from in the playoff. I think could totally change the dynamic of an offense or a defense, could change the way a team looks as you head into the playoff. Then we'll get to a little bit of transfer portal updates, a lot of different things happening. We'll get to some losers of the transfer portal thus far. A lot of teams have purged a lot of guys and definitely have a ton of work to do over the next month and a half or so. Then we'll get some headline updates. The biggest one of the bunch is Dan Mullen is on his way to Las Vegas, one thing that we actually forgot on yesterday's show. So I want to break that down for you guys, and then a couple other different things from around the country I want to break down. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have fun back and forth here, is to use that super chat. At the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page, you can click that $sign, add any question, comment you'd like. It'll pop up on the screen and we can have a fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be as interactive as possible, so utilize that. You can get your question on the screen and we can have definitely a fun interactive conversation here. But let's go ahead and jump into this thing, and this is a rather complicated question. What is Bill Belichick capable of in year one is a question that is going to be really, really hard to answer. And just some quick updates so people understand where we are right now. It is a 5-year deal for $10 million annually. The one kind of caveat in there that is very interesting is until June 1st, the buyout is a normal buyout. As a June 1st of 2025, it's a very normal buyout. It is exactly the way that normal college football coaches work it out. After that date, it drops to $1 million. Now, does that mean he wants to have the door open to possibly go to a couple NFL openings? Is it just to make it easier to move forward with his successor if you want to do that earlier on? What does that look like? I don't really know, but it's definitely something that caught a lot of people's eyes and definitely could be a sign that Bill Belichick doesn't seem on setting up shop at UNC for too long. It does seem like he wants to be there for a while. It doesn't seem like he's running out the door at the very first opportunity, but it feels like he gave himself a little bit of an escape hatch. If someone starts to call from the NFL that he feels inclined to take, he could probably get out of that for only $1 million. Obviously, is something that he'd be willing to do. So that's kind of the one big caveat to the contract at the very least. But the big time thing that we found out, or really was kind of known as we were going into this, but especially found out over the last little bit, is this was a big time struggle behind the scenes. This was a lot of people on one side wanting one thing, which seemed to be John Summerall, the head coach from Tulane, and then a lot of people from the other side wanting one thing, which was Bill Belichick. The people on the one side with Bill Belichick are the ones that write the checks, and that's kind of the difference maker here. They said, we are going to invest X amount of money if Bill Belichick is hired. That's the difference maker. We all know in the world of college football, you need a certain level of investment if you want to be successful in this sport, if you want to be a contender in this sport. If Bill Belichick's the only one that's going to get you that, you better hire Bill Belichick and just see where you land at the end of it. So here's the reality of the situation. The UNC Athletics have just changed the way they allocate money. Full stop. They have totally changed the way that they are going to go about business around their athletic department. I'm not saying the basketball program is going to fall off a cliff. They got plenty of money to go around, but they are going to put more investment into football going forward, win or lose. So that's kind of the reality of this is you better win. There's going to be a lot of people that are putting a lot of money towards this over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. If Bill Belichick doesn't put the records that they want on the table, they might have a problem with that. So the question becomes, what is the record you want on the table? What is the record that would be okay, at least in year one, as we talk about this right now? What are the things that you're going to have to be able to do in year one that Bill Belichick will be able to sit back and say, okay, give me that investment next year, and everyone will feel more than fine with that? Well, it all starts with the recruiting effort, right? You have to go out and find guys. I don't know if Jacoby Criswell is going to stay around. I don't know who the starting quarterback is. Frankly, I would almost bet with you that about 70% of the roster is not in Chapel Hill yet. I would bet about 70% of the 2025 roster for UNC is just not on that team yet. I assume they will be on that team in the next month or so, and then we'll see what happens from there. It's going to be a really, really crazy process, and to be totally honest, this first year is probably not going to be the exact Bill Belichick team that he wants. It's obviously the way that it works with just about every single first-year head coach. They come in, they do with they do what they can with what they have, and then they move forward and try to continue to build things. Now, the big time question here is how are they going to recruit? And frankly, probably going to be Deion Sanders in Colorado 2.0. It's probably going to be a lot of scouting other teams in college football. It's going to be pulling kids from those teams to play on your team. Now, the big question of that is that's still very different than what it is in the NFL. That's still very different than scouting a 5-year senior that has played a ton of snaps, that knows exactly what he's doing, and is coming to you as a relatively polished kid. Now you're looking at a freshman or a sophomore that is not quite all the way there. How does that kind of change with Bill Belichick? Because the reality is he's done an incredible job of putting together winning products. A lot of those players that came to him were finished products when they came to him. So that's kind of the that's the chief difference between the way that he's going to have to handle business at the NFL level comparative to the college level is he's going to have to be a little bit more of a developmental piece in this. And obviously, I think he's more than capable of doing that. But at the end of the day, it is a new challenge for him. It is a different challenge. And if he is a part of the talent acquisition, which I have to assume he will be at least in some respect, he is going to have to evaluate these players differently because I think we all agree a lot of those NFL drafts for the Patriots when Belichick was the GM were not necessarily inspiring. Let's just leave it at that for the time being, but it's one of those things where it's a totally different evaluation process. It's a totally different talent acquisition process, although people will tell you this is entirely the NFL now. It is very different from the NFL for a number of different reasons, including the people that you have to deal with in this process. So there's a lot of different things that are going to change in the way that Bill Belichick has to go about business, especially in the world of recruiting, especially in the world of just evaluation. And one of the big time questions is, are you going to lean into high school recruiting? You're probably not going to very much. They sit at 90th in high school recruiting right now. Their best recruit, Bryce Baker, has not signed and is looking elsewhere. If you can get that guy on campus, then you're in a really, really good place. You're definitely taking steps in the right direction. If you can't, then you might have a little bit of a problem on your hands. So you got a lot of different things to worry about right about now. Obviously, the portal is going to be the biggest thing for 2025 and probably going forward for UNC, but they got to be able to pull in some guys from high school, and that is not an easy thing to do for a head coach that is used to evaluating guys that are relatively polished products, relatively to the place that they're going to be for the rest of their career. A sophomore in high school, a junior in high school is not nearly to that level. So those are a couple of the pitfalls that you could find. But let's look at the schedule here for a second because it's manageable. It's not necessarily easy by any means. You got 2 games against TCU and at UCF that are going to be tough. One way or the other, those are going to be interesting. The fact that Scott Frost against Bill Belichick is happening is very interesting to me. But at the end of the day, those are 2 games that are going to be tough. Relative toss-ups probably would lean in the direction of the other team, but UCF is a unknown product right now. TCU didn't have the greatest year, but I'd lean that direction in the opening game of the year, at least right now. But then you get into the conference schedule, and you're able to avoid Miami, SMU, and Louisville. You do get Clemson, you do get Syracuse, you do get a team like Duke, but you don't necessarily have this murderer's row. You do have the ability to win a lot of these games. A lot of them are going to be toss-ups, and a lot of them are going to possibly go your direction because you got a really good defensive coach on the other side. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this. And then what is good in this schedule? As UNC fans look at this schedule, I have to wonder what is good. What is good enough for Bill Belichick in year one? From where I'm standing, I think 6-6, 7-5 is very, very good, if I'm being totally honest. Given all of the crazy moving parts that are happening right now, given that they're pretty much past the time where they can recruit high school kids, given a lot of the different factors here, I think 7-5 would be a great year. I think it would be a great start to this process, and then I think they could take another leap in 2026. Are the fans okay with that? Are the fans good with rolling out with a 7-5 season and then moving forward to 2026 is a question that will only be answered in time, really. So all of this stuff is going to go into it, and you have a ton of different questions. You are going to lose a lot of guys like Omarion Hampton. Kobe Paysour has already left through the portal. You have a lot of different guys that are going to be walking out of this program. You also have a lot of guys that are going to want to stick around, and keeping Freddie Kitchens is one of the decisions that he has made. It sounds like he is going to stick around. That will help them to at least give a little bit of a kind of bridge between Bill Belichick and these players that are on the team currently. Hopefully they can keep some of those talented players around, and then you got to build out the rest of the staff, which obviously people have pointed toward Josh McDaniels as a possible OC. I know he's close with the Weiss family, so Charlie Weiss Jr. would be a fantastic pickup if he was able to do that. Be a little bit surprised if he was, but absolutely would be a great pick if he was able to do that. And then you obviously have Steve Belichick. He will be on this staff if I had to imagine. I really can't see another reality, because one way or another, whether it's, he's set up to be the head coach in waiting or any of that type of stuff, I don't know that that's the case. We will find that out obviously in time, but the reality is he's going to be on this staff, and you're going to need someone on this staff that is going to be able to take over at some point, because the reality is Bill Belichick is 72. At some point, he is going to hang him up. At some point, probably within the next 5 years, he will not be the head coach at UNC anymore, and you need a guy there that is ready to take over. You have to assume it will be Steve Belichick if he is on that staff. Obviously, a lot of still moving parts around that. So when you look at this, I mean, you have a lot of the infrastructure in place over there. You have the money that you need. You have the investment, and you have a lot of talent to choose from that area, both in high school and in the college football realm. It just comes down to evaluation. It just comes down to these people that have spent so much of their time, so much of their energy at the NFL level, going down and having to recalibrate the way they go about business, because it is a different caliber of player that you're evaluating. It is a different thing you're looking for. It is different people that you're dealing with, not so much agents, but quote-unquote agents, and you have to deal with that. All of that stuff just comes with the territory. How much is Bill Belichick willing to deal with that? How much will he deal with that? And then, on top of that, if he doesn't deal with the recruiting part of this at all, will these players feel close enough to him? Will they have the connection to him to not leave after 1 year? All of this is questions that will have to be answered. All of this is curiosity that will be very, very hard to get an idea of. We'll figure out more in January. Once we have a little bit of a roster, once we have a big-time staff and we know exactly where all the pieces fit, we'll have a better idea of what year one is going to look like under him. But I can tell you a couple of things. I know it's going to be very tough, but I also know that they can compete for that. When you have that guy in that building, that is going to be one of the expectations of your team. You have every ability to possibly pull that off. It's just going to take a lot of work and a lot of recalibration from some people in that building. Now, all of those people are more than capable. So I'm not necessarily betting against them. I cannot wait to see how this unfolds. I love that Bill Belichick is in college football, because it gives you juice. Same reason why I love Deion Sanders in college football. It brings eyes. It shows people just how special the sport is, and love that he's here. We'll see how it works out. Definitely going to be a really interesting thing, both from expectations to the way they evaluate players, to the talent they can get, to how long that talent will stay. All of this is big-time questions around this new hire, but it's going to be a fascinating year one, that's for sure, and I promise you we will break it down in depth throughout that time. But let's go to our first break here, and when we come back, let's get to the CFP tiers. Let's talk about who I actually think can win a national title, who I think probably can't, who I think would need lightning in a bottle if they were going to get it done, and we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about Bill Belichick and what we can expect in year one. I don't know, if I'm being totally honest with you. There are a lot of different moving parts of this. Obviously, the next month around the portal will decide a lot of what he's capable of. A lot of players on that roster are probably making decisions one way or the other. He's figuring out how he's going to evaluate players, and then expectations are going to be a big time part of this. So there's a lot of questions. To put it shortly, there are a lot of different questions around that hire, but frankly, I love that he's here. It's going to be fascinating to watch UNC unfold, and frankly, the fact that people are talking about UNC football just makes me happy. Love to see those jerseys, love to see that program get a little bit of love, and we'll see if it comes to fruition in 2025. But let's get into the CFP tiers. Let's talk about who can win a national title, who can't, who maybe can, and there's a lot of different people that absolutely maybe can. What's going on, Anthony? Nice to see you. But let's jump into this, and let's get into, first of all, the firm contenders. And to me, there are two people that really stand out. It is Oregon and Georgia. It's the top two seeds in this thing, and kind of for different reasons, if I'm being totally honest. But Oregon's been the best team all year. Most importantly, they're a team that can win games different ways. That has been the biggest thing that I've noticed throughout this year, where last year it wasn't necessarily that they couldn't. It was more, it felt like there was a lot leaning on Bo Nix in that offense. It felt like there was a lot having to do with, we got to score with these teams. We got to be able to do all of the things that we can offensively to open up a lot of those doors. And then you get into this year and they can play really tough defense. They can win a game at Wisconsin 16-13. They can win a game dominating Penn State 45-37. They can do so many different things. They can hurt you so many different ways, and it's so tough to get a beat on what this team is going to be. And then you get the biggest thing. It is the mentality. It is what Dan Lanning brings to this team, where they are absolutely laser focused all year. They seem to be getting stronger in that respect throughout the year, and you got a couple of leaders on that team that know what this is about, whether they have been on the Oregon team in past years, or there's someone like Dylan Gabriel who's just played a lot of football, who has a certain heart rate that is going to be very calm in big time moments. That cannot be oversold, how important that is, especially when you're playing a team like Georgia, possibly in a national title, who just has it. I can't necessarily describe what that thing is. They have that thing that is really impossible to figure out. But if you let this team hang around, if you let this team get within 2 scores or even 1 score towards the end of the game, they are going to make you pay for it. They are going to win that game. It's the same thing that happened with Texas in the SEC championship. They score a couple more times in the championship game. It's going to be a nightmare. It would have been a game that Georgia was able to, Texas was able to really pull away from. Georgia wasn't really able to get back into, but they let Georgia stick around. They let Georgia do the thing where they stick around just for long enough, and then they make those couple of plays. And I can't necessarily describe how they do it. I can't necessarily describe what goes on behind the scenes to get them to that level, but they have it all. They have the talent, they have the mentality, and I think they're starting to have that leadership, that thing that you need. And maybe it is just Carson Beck went down and everyone in that room looked around and said, they need more from us. They need us to step up a little bit more than we had before, and they definitely did that in the SEC championship, especially in that second half. If they do that the rest of the way, this defense is going to dominate the day, and this offense is going to be more than fine with Gunnar Stockton at the helm. So those are the two people that I think firm control. They are the guys that absolutely are definitely going to be title contenders. I'd be a little bit surprised if they didn't. Oregon's a little bit different because of their path, so I won't necessarily say I would be a little bit surprised one way or the other. I think these two will find their way to the semifinal. I think these two are too good. I think they're too talented. I think their mental toughness is just too good for them to fall in those first couple of rounds. Obviously, that Ohio State-Oregon game is one that a lot of people are picking the Buckeyes in possibly. And then Tennessee-Oregon, I think a lot of people might be leaning towards the Vols. But at the end of the day, I think both these teams are as tough as can be, and they are the firm title contenders as far as I'm concerned. Then you have the teams where it's just if things fall into place, and really it's only a couple things that really need to fall into place for this group. Texas, this one's as clear as day. It's just the quarterback play. Figuring out the right quarterback split between Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers, I've made that very clear. It is Quinn Ewers' team. He is the outright leader. If you bench him now, you are not putting yourself in a better position to win a national title. You do have to use Arch Manning more. You do have to find a way to get him on the field, utilize his legs, utilize his arm strength at some times to hit some of those deep balls that you have struggled with and Quinn Ewers has struggled with, and then you got to find your way to a title. It is a tightrope walk. We've talked about it a number of times. Steve Sarkisian has one of the hardest jobs of just about anyone in this thing because it is going to be a really, really tough thing to navigate, both from how you do it on the field and how it affects things off the field. Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning seem to be best of friends. This obviously can create some issues. So it's definitely going to be really interesting to watch this unfold. And obviously, if that falls into place, this offense really starts clicking. That defense is going to suffocate you, and Texas could outright run away with a national title, frankly. Then you have Ohio State. We talked about Steve Sarkisian having to have a really, really tough time throughout this. Ryan Day's got a really tough time throughout this. They are a very talented team. The thing that needs to fall into place is the mentality. Let's just be totally honest. This is a team that the last couple of times they've walked onto the field with Michigan, they have been the less tough team, the team that has wanted it less, and the team that has gotten beaten over and over and over again. So you have a lot of things that you have to figure out on that realm. On the football field, it's really just figuring out a way to find an explosive pass game. It's getting back to the world where you're just throwing it up to Jeremiah Smith a couple of times a game. Maybe that's lame, maybe that's not the most interesting thing in the world, and maybe it's not all that sustainable. He's going to make some plays. He's going to give you a couple of big-time plays that will get momentum, that will get energy into that team, and then everything goes. And then everything really falls into place, and things really get rolling for that Ohio State offense. So you got to find that one way or the other, on the field and then off the field. You just got to find toughness. I know they have it in there. I know they have the leadership in there to do that. It's just got to click at the right time here. And as Anthony's talking about, James Franklin might be the thing that needs to fall into place for Penn State, if we're being totally honest. But another thing that I'm interested to watch here is they have talent at wide receiver. They have guys that can make plays at wide receiver in Omari Evans, in Harrison Wallace. They need those guys to step up. They need one of those guys to be a huge, huge player throughout this thing and maybe just change the way that he's played throughout the year. Maybe it's just one of those things where you look back on his regular season stats and you don't understand how he went on this run during the playoff. But sometimes it just has to happen. Sometimes you just have to have the guy that steps up to the plate and makes all the plays on the outside and takes away a little bit from the best tight end in the country that was decided yesterday, and a defense that has some issues, definitely has some issues. You got to help them out offensively, and then if you do have issues on the back end of that defense, if you do have holes, Abdul Carter has to just be a game wrecker. So for Penn State, it's definitely a couple more things. I'll give you that, Anthony, and James Franklin might just be one of those things that needs to fall into place. But all these teams have the ability to make a run of the national title, just need a couple of things to go their way. And then we got the dangerous group, the group that I think is definitely going to be in position to possibly make a run at this thing. And I'm trying to find Anthony. Frankly, I've seen a lot of people kind of lean that direction. And when you look at this Notre Dame team right about now, they are operating at peak efficiency. There's no doubt about that. That run game is as good as you will find across the country. Jeremiah Love is one of my favorite players in the country. And the big thing here is they got to find a pass game, right? They got to find a consistent pass game where they can go to a couple of guys maybe over and over and over again. Maybe it's just a couple of guys that really lead the way, whether that's Mitchell Evans or Chris Mitchell or Jaden Greathouse. They have dudes that can make some plays. You're going to have to find them at some point, right? You can't just go out there and just hope that your three-headed monster of Jeremiah Smith, Jadarian Price, and Riley Leonard are going to run you to a victory. It's going to happen a couple of times. I bet they could do it against Indiana. I don't know if they could do it against Georgia. So at some point, those decisions are going to have to be made. Those plays are going to have to be made, and kind of comes down to Riley Leonard and those wide receivers, if they're going to be able to be that dangerous team. When I look at this team, there is not a team on here that is running as efficiently as they are. It just comes down to finding that pass game at some point throughout these games and making people respect that, and then letting Jeremiah Love do what Jeremiah Love does. Tennessee, you're kind of in a funny position because their path to the title would be Ohio State, possibly or Ohio State, then Oregon, then possibly Texas, then possibly Georgia. Remarkably tough, let's just be totally honest. But when you're looking at a team that has a lot of the things that title teams have, where you have an elite defense, you have an elite D-line especially, you also have a quarterback that can make all of the plays in the world, can make all the throws in the world, you have a running back that's one of the best in the country, I would argue top 2 or 3 in the country in Dylan Sampson, you have the ability to make a run here. You have the ability to make some big-time plays, and for me, the most likely upset is Tennessee. I know that's kind of a square answer. If I were to go outside of that, I think I would have to go Clemson, Texas. I think Clemson has an ability to kind of match up with Texas in a way, especially with that D-line, that could cause some problems for the Longhorns. And let's talk about Clemson. They have the talent profile that is a little bit closer to a national title winner than a lot of the other teams in this dance. A lot of the other ACC and Big 12 opponents aren't quite to that level. Clemson definitely is. They have the dudes to make some plays. They need elite play from their O-line. As far as I'm concerned, that is the thing that really needs to fall into place for them, at least offensively. If their O-line can really play good football and their run game can get going, they absolutely have a path to Atlanta. As crazy as that sounds, they would need to beat a lot of really good teams to get there, but you have a D-line like that with TJ Parker, and you have a run game that is really rolling, you're going to be able to suffocate a lot of these teams and just take the air out of the ball in games that you're very badly going to need to against Texas and Oregon and a couple other teams you're going to play. So that would be the team that I would notice the most, as far as I'm concerned, Anthony, just because of the talent profile of that team and particularly the D-line talent of that team with Peter Woods and TJ Parker. They could cause some problems for Texas, and if they do, maybe they're moving on to face an Oregon or to face Arizona State in the second round, which is brings us to the lightning in the bottle crowd, and that is going to be Arizona State, probably chief among them. To me, they kind of feel like that TCU team that went on a little bit of a run, had everything going for them, always found their way out of precarious situations, played really tough football. Obviously, a little bit of a different approach, but Sam Leavitt does kind of remind me of Max Duggan just by the way that he plays, the way he goes about business. So this is the team that has a lot of different things that you love going for it. There are so many different players that are absolutely remarkable. Cam Scadaboo, obviously chief among them. Losing Jordan Tyson is a tough one. There's no doubt about that. Losing Jordan Tyson is something that absolutely is going to have an effect on this race, and you're going to have to find a little bit more lightning in the bottle with Cam Scadaboo because of that. But he's been more than happy to step up to the plate in the past, and I can't imagine that's going to change this time around. Then you do have SMU. Kevin Jennings could end up being the story of this tournament. I think he's the most dynamic playmaker in this thing. That's why I had him ranked a little bit higher than a lot of different people do in their quarterback rankings when I did him a couple of days ago, because I think this kid has the ability to make all the plays in the world. I think his arm is not necessarily elite when you come to this group of quarterbacks, but definitely is more than capable of making the plays. And then he's one of those guys that if he takes off and makes a couple of plays with his legs throughout the game, he can take over this thing. He is the player that could totally take over this thing. And then you look up in the semifinals and you look at SMU there, and you're wondering how it's Kevin Jennings going absolutely crazy pretty much every single game. And then you do have Indiana. You do have the team that they have the coach, they have the quarterback, they have the playmakers. In fact, I was looking back on my coaching rankings, and someone commented that Curt Cignetti was too low, and I kind of agree with him. I probably disrespected Curt Cignetti just a little bit too much. Didn't want to feel too daunted there, I promise. But at the end of the day, the line of scrimmage play is going to be what decides this. Obviously, they've done an incredible job on that front throughout the year. They got to play some real big boy teams. They got to play Ohio State over and over and over again, essentially. They got to play that game as many times as they can, and they got to come out on the other side of that game as many times as they can. So, very talented team, definitely has the ability to make some things happen. A lot of stuff has to kind of fall into place for that to happen. And then, can Genty do it? That's the group that Boise State is in right now. I love Boise State. They're so much fun to watch. They've been one of my favorite teams throughout the year. The reality is, if they're going to win a national title, if they're going to find their way to Atlanta and win a national title, Ashton Genty's running for 250 yards per game and scoring 3 touchdowns, just plain and simple. They do not necessarily have the ability to make that run that a lot of these other teams do have, unless number 2 is carrying a ridiculous amount of the load. He has all year, and I think he'd be more than willing to do it at this time around, but definitely going to be the thing that kind of gets Boise State there. Is it Ashton Genty? Is it not? Pretty much that is going to be decided. If he is an absolute superstar, then you could definitely get a lot of different things going. If you don't get the production that you want out of this kid, then you're probably going to be going home as soon as possible. So a lot of different things going into this, and Boise State's the only team that I think probably has as minor of a shot as you possibly could have to win a national title. But Anthony makes a good point. I really like the story of Indiana. I really love it, and it's been so much fun to watch. When you look at the talent profile, when you look at the physicality profile, Notre Dame matches up very, very well, and SMU definitely is being underrated. The biggest thing for me is how will they handle that weather? How will they handle the cold up there in Happy Valley, coming all the way from Dallas? That'll definitely be an interesting thing and kind of a new thing in the college football playoff world, but it's going to be fascinating to watch what happens in this, and obviously we got a lot of different things to go into next week, but just wanted to give you an idea of where I have all these teams standing. I think if I was to pick one of those lightning in the bottle teams, I think I'd have to go to Arizona State. I think they're a team that's just rolling downhill at the right time. I think they have one of the best players in the entire league, and I think they have the coach that is just crazy enough to possibly get him over the hump in one of those big time games. So a lot of different things happening, and we will break it down with in the next week or so as we get into the playoff week. But let's take our second break, and we'll go back to the CFP teams. We'll talk about the X Factor players, the player that I think is going to be the most important part of what they do in the playoff one way or the other, whether that's being really successful or not being all that successful. I think it could come down to these players. So I'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about who I think can actually win the national title, and Anthony had one question here about Dan Lanning, and he was talking about a lot of the different things that he's been doing since he's been up there in Oregon, and it has been an SEC approach. There's no two ways about that. The second he got up there, he started getting some big boys, he started getting the investment that a lot of those SEC teams have, and it's been an absolute rocket ship. And it kind of reminds me of what Steve Sarkisian did when he showed up at Texas. I think both those guys knew that their programs were probably heading somewhere else here pretty soon. They were probably heading to some of the bigger boy conferences, and they knew they had to beef up before they got there. So both those coaches, both Steve Sarkisian as well as Dan Lanning, have done a great job kind of building out SEC programs in non-SEC places. And then you get into the big boy programs and you can really flex your muscles. And that's exactly what we're seeing happening. So Dan Lanning's done a great job. It's been an incredible thing to watch and definitely have a lot of that SEC flavor up there in Eugene, Oregon. But let's get to these X Factor players, as we head into the CFP. And we'll start with that team that Dan Lanning coaches, and we'll start with the player on the outside. Jabbar Muhammad, to me, is hugely important because you look at this Oregon offense, it's a well-oiled machine. There are very few defenses that are going to be outright be able to stop them cold. The reality is you're going to have guys on the outside that can make some plays. They're not necessarily the best defense in the world. They kind of got hurt in a number of different places. They've gotten battered, especially down the field in that Penn State game. You have to have a guy. You have to have one guy on that outside that you can say, go guard Jeremiah Smith, go guard Matthew Golden, go guard Dante Thornton, and we feel confident that you can go do that because obviously they need to get some more numbers in some other places. One way or the other, they're going to have to play around with that back end just a little bit. I think Jabbar Muhammad's going to be a guy that you have to be able to play at elite level, one way or the other. He is going to be a hugely important player, and he is definitely going to be a guy that you're going to want to play at an elite level. As for this Mario question, yeah, it really does feel the same way. Excuse me for the little bit of delay, but it does feel the same way. It does feel like kind of what Dan Lanning's doing up there, Mario Cristobal is trying to do down there in Miami. Obviously, it feels like he's kind of on the same track, right? You know, he had really, really close to a conference championship this year. Maybe next year is that Dan Lanning type year where you can really get things rolling. Obviously, that defense needs to take a big-time step forward, and that's going to be a big-time conversation throughout the offseason. But at the end of the day, it does feel like Mario is building kind of that SEC program. That's where he came from. Totally makes sense that he would do that, and especially on that offensive line. He's building some big dudes that could play in the SEC tomorrow. And as for the Ryan Williams comment, I'd be surprised if I'm being totally honest. I think that offense fits him absolutely perfectly, and frankly, I think the big-time thing is just finding the quarterback that can execute the offense the way that Kalen DeBoer has it set over there in Washington. once that is set, once that is in place, they will be able to be very, very explosive and very dangerous in the pass game, and I can't imagine Ryan Williams doesn't see that. Now, I don't know. There's definitely been some rumors going around. I wouldn't bet on him doing that, if I'm being totally honest. I wouldn't bet on Ryan Williams finding his way out of Alabama, but with the portal, you can't take anything for granted, obviously. There's no doubt about that. But absolutely, Anthony, the defensive line is going to be huge. Maybe I'll do position groups next week and break that down for you guys as well, because I definitely have some thoughts there as well. But Jalen Walker is a guy I want to talk about for Georgia, and this is the guy. He was the Buckus Award winner, was named yesterday, and a hugely important player for this playoff race. Because when I look at this Georgia team, especially with Gunnar Stockton at the helm, the biggest thing they're going to have to get on their side is field advantage. The biggest thing they're going to have to get on their side is being able to flip the field. They don't have their punter and Brett Thorson the rest of the way, which is a huge factor in that. But also, get turnovers in plus field position, put Gunnar Stockton in really good positions, and then let him do his thing. He is going to be able to get you touchdowns in the red zone because of his running ability, because of his ability to keep those defenses on his toes. You just have to give him those short fields every now and then. Every couple of games, just make sure that you give him a drive that starts at the 30-yard line, the drive that starts at the 20-yard line, and then he can just take it in for a touchdown. That will be what changes Georgia. That's what changed them in the Texas game, made them so dangerous, and got them a 15-point win on the road. You got to have it in these playoff games, especially with your backup quarterback going. Also, yeah, Malachi Starks is another guy here as well. There's so many different guys around that. And Malachi Starks, I actually talked about, I believe, a couple of days ago on here when we were talking about a different important players from around the CFP. And when I look at this Georgia team, they need a leader on that back end that really can get everyone under control. And Malachi Starks would be a big part of that. The way that I see it, at least from my perspective, is I think this pass rush is a little bit more capable, I guess is the best way to put it. And I think if this pass rush can get home, then maybe the back end doesn't have too much to worry about, frankly. For Arizona State, Tramon Metier is a hugely important player because Arizona State's rolling downhill right now. It's been incredible to watch them do what they did. Xavier Guillory, Melquan Stovall, Malik McClain all stepped up in big-time ways in that Big 12 championship. It's not going to be that way every single time. It's probably not going to be that way against Texas because they're going to try to take away those wide receivers. They're going to try to say, you're going to beat us in different ways. One way or the other, you are going to find a way to beat us in different ways, and he's going to have to be one of those ways. When you're keying in on Cam Skattebo, when you're keying in on the backfield in so many different ways, leaking out that tight end every couple of times throughout the game is going to be hugely important, and he is going to be the kind of safety blanket of this offense where you used to have Jordan Tyson. Now it just might have to be Metier the rest of the way, and he's more than capable of pulling that off because he absolutely has the ability to do that. But it's one of those players that you're going to have to see a ton from, and definitely is someone that can make those plays when he is given the ball. For Boise State, Sai Oladipo, is the guy on the back end for Boise State. He is an absolute beast, 6.5 sacks on the year. Definitely a guy that is a little bit more comfortable playing down in the box and helping out in run support. He's going to have to do that against some big-time teams. If he has to play Penn State in the second round, he's got to tackle Katron Allen. He's got to tackle Nicholas Singleton, and it's going to be an absolute nightmare. It's going to be something that is going to be really tough for them to get a beat on. It's going to be really tough for him to handle, but he's the guy that needs to step up. And then on the back end playing kind of coverage, Ty Benefield, Zion Washington, the other safeties on this team are going to be absolutely huge, but this is kind of the game breaker of the group. This is the game breaker that definitely can do a lot of special things. And Anthony, I fully understand the kind of that way of thinking for Arizona State, the run game being the X factor. The way that I see it, with the run game being what it is, and everyone kind of keying in on that the way that they're going to be, I think those pass catchers are going to be hugely important. The way that I see it is when you play a lot of these teams from the SEC or from the Big Ten, they're going to be much more equipped to stop a guy like Cam Skattebo. They're going to be much more equipped to put a couple of more guys in the box and definitely kind of slow that down. So then I'm looking for a counter, I guess is the best way to put it. I'm looking for the thing that kind of opens up the run game just a little bit more where, yes, the run game is going to lead the way for them, but you got to find the pass game where you can find it. So that's kind of the way that I was looking at it. But honestly, kind of different strokes for different folks. Definitely a lot of different arguments both ways. So I understand where you're coming from. The way that I looked at it was just, if the run game is going to be such a big part of this, you need the counter punch to that. For Texas is Trey Wisner. There's really no question about this. He is the key to this Texas offense because we know this run game is the key to the Texas offense. When you looked at how good that Texas offense has been throughout the year, when you looked at when they really hit their stride against Michigan, against Florida, against a couple of these other teams, it has been when they've been able to run the ball. It's been when they've been able to control the clock and then let that defense do what they do. So Trey Wisner is going to be huge in this game, in this tournament, because Quinn Ewers, with time, with a run game, can tear apart a defense. He can do absolutely ridiculous things. He's got to have help somewhere. He's got to help the guys around. He's got to have the guys around him making big time plays. And Trey Wisner's probably the chief among them, if I'm being totally honest. And Boise State absolutely could definitely be the pass game. Pass game is going to be huge in this one, and definitely going to be something where a lot of guys are going to be stacking guys into the box. If Maddox Madsen can make those plays on that back end, I think it's going to be hugely important. But the way that I looked at it was just, this defense is going to need a lot of help. They're going to need that game-changing player that can make that one big play, whether it's a turnover or a sack or something like that, to give them the short field to help Maddox Madsen. So a lot of different moving parts, and frankly, there's a lot of different things that you can give the X factor to, and I think there's so many different ways to go about this. But the way that I look at it, Trey Wisner is a hugely important player for Texas, and absolutely a security blanket for someone like Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning in that thing. It's going to be really interesting to watch all of that unfold. But Penn State, Omari Evans is hugely important to me. You need a pass game down the field. You need to be explosive. This is probably the guy where you find that. Tyler Warren is more than capable of taking over games. I'm not worried about Tyler Warren. He is going to get his, and he is going to get it pretty consistently. But Omari Evans, Harrison Wallace, these wide receivers need to step up. And when I look at Omari Evans, I see a guy that absolutely brings out the best in what Drew Aller can do, because he can hit those deep balls about as well as anyone in the country. And Omari Evans is more than happy to catch a couple of those deep balls. For Notre Dame, to me, it's Mitchell Evans. And it's kind of the same philosophy that we were talking about a second ago with Arizona State, where you have this run game. It's not going to be an issue. You know the run game is going to help you. You know the run game is going to be a big part of this. You need the counterpunch. You need the guy that is going to go out there and make the catch and then run for 20 yards afterwards. You need the guy that might make the big-time catch down the seam over a defender. You need those big-time plays to just keep this drive moving, to respect some of the things on the back end, to get those linebackers to pull out of the box just a little bit more, and then that run game can really get going. So more than anything, this is just about having a counterpunch. It's about showing people that you can throw the ball over the middle of the field, that you can be dangerous down the field, and then you run the ball. And then you do what what got Penn State here, which is running the ball down people's throat. You need a little bit of a counterpunch if you're going to be able to do that against the elite teams in the country. Quinshon Judkins is a guy on Ohio State's offense that I think is hugely important, and frankly, I could have picked about 10 different people as we got into this one, but when we look into this Quinshon Judkins kind of path and what he needs to do in this tournament, and a lot of the different times when you saw this Ohio State offense really start to click, when it felt like this offense was almost unstoppable, everything was rolling downhill, everything was going, it felt like every time in those games you'd see one 65-yard touchdown run from Quinshon Judkins, one 80-yard touchdown run, one 50-yard touchdown run. He is the home run hitter. He is the guy that can totally change the complexion of a game, and especially against a D-line of Tennessee that is going to be so tough, that is going to be really hard to run through. If you find one opening, being able to take that thing to the house can totally change this game. So when I look at this Ohio State offense, obviously the pass game is going to be a huge factor. And frankly, while Anthony's texting here, I might have to redo this and do a couple of different more grandiose X factors, not to zero in on players, because obviously there's quite a few out there to be had. But when I look at what this offense can be and what this offense is capable of, especially against a defensive line like Tennessee's, it's just about taking advantage of the openings that you will have. I think you're going to have a couple. I think Quinshon Judkins probably the best guy to take advantage of those. Jermon McCoy for Tennessee is hugely important to me because this back end is just not all that good. It's kind of like the Oregon back end in the sense where you have the talent, you have a lot of guys that can make plays, but then when your run game really does struggle, when the other team has the ability to get behind you, when they have the really talented wide receivers and their run game gets going, then you have to pull guys down into the box. this can be an attackable group. Now, Jermod McCoy does have 4 INTs, 7 pass breakups on the year, but he's going to get the toughest matchup of the year on Saturday. He is going to get Jeremiah Smith, he is going to get Emeka Egbuka, and he's going to have to deal with that. He did deal with Ryan Williams more than fine, but I can almost promise you it is an entirely different matchup from Ryan Williams to Jeremiah Smith, just from the way that they play, from their body makeup. It is going to be a really, really tall order, and then you just get to move on and possibly play Tez Johnson. And then just for fun, you get to move on and possibly play Isaiah Bond. So it's going to be a nightmare. He's going to have to be a huge piece for this team, and that back end in general is going to have to be huge for this team. Miles Price is a guy that I'm watching for Indiana, and Indiana's been a dominant offense. They've been going all over the place. They've been making some big-time plays. Elijah Surratt has become a huge player, but it can't fall all on his shoulders. And they've done a good job of spreading the ball out. It's not necessarily to say that Elijah Surratt has been dragging this team along throughout the entire year, but it is to say when you get into a playoff format, there's going to be a lot of people that are playing him straight up with a man in press coverage, and then they're going to have a safety over top. That's probably the way they're going to play number 13 throughout just about the entire tournament. Guys like Miles Price become that more important. Guys like Omar Cooper become that more important. Guys like the run game between Tyson Lawton and Justice Ellison become that more important. So you got to be able to find a way to spread the ball out. You got to make sure that Ohio State game where it was a lot of Elijah Surratt or just about no one else. I think they had 68 passing yards in that game. 40 of them were to Elijah Surratt. So you got to find a way around it. You got to find a way to diversify what you're doing offensively, and Miles Price, I think, will be a huge piece for that. For SMU, Roderick Daniels Jr. has become one of my favorite players in the country. He is so much fun to watch, and he is a guy that can touch the ball in so many different ways. Has 3 receiving touchdowns, has 3 rushing touchdowns, has definitely the ability to take an end around 80 yards to the house. He is so talented, and you look at this SMU offense, there's so many different things that they do really well, including running the ball. Sometimes you just need a little bit of misdirection. Sometimes it is handing the ball or faking a handoff to Brashard Smith and then tossing an end around to Roderick Daniels, letting him go around the edge and make some things happen. So when I look at this SMU offense, there's so many different things to like. There's so many different things that they do well. But when you get into a world where you don't necessarily have the talent advantage, you don't necessarily have the advantage in terms of physicality, you need to get a little creative. And Roderick Daniels is exactly the guy that will get creative for you. And then Bryant Wesco for Clemson. This was honestly the layup of the day for me. He is the guy that is going to keep this offense moving because this offense needs explosives to keep moving. He is the explosive player on this team. He is so dangerous. Obviously, Texas has the guys on the back end to possibly handle him a little bit better than some others in the ACC, but he's a hugely important player in this entire tournament for Clemson. I think when you look at this Clemson offense overall, obviously the run game is where everything starts, both with Phil Maffa and Cade Klubnik. Hopefully Phil Maffa is healthy for that game. We'll give updates throughout next week and when we get a little bit more updates. But overall, you look at this team as it kind of is currently constructed. They need big-time plays over the middle of the field, and Bryant Wesco is the guy that makes those plays. Period. End of story. You're going to have to find a way to get him the ball and get him the ball pretty consistently throughout this playoff. But a lot of different X factors. As Anthony said, you can go any number of ways, and maybe I'll back off of players just a little bit and go more grandiose X factors on Monday or Tuesday, but definitely a lot of different things going into this and a lot of players that are going to have to step up a little bit more than they have throughout the year. So going to be fascinating to watch that unfold, but let's take our third break here. When we come back, let's talk about the transfer portal. There is a lot of stuff happening. We will be going fairly quickly throughout this next one, but a lot of different commitments, a lot of guys staying where they were, even though some rumors said they were leaving, a lot of guys that are gearing up to commit. So we'll break it all down right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the X Factor players for all of the teams in the CFP. Probably we'll go back to that with an X Factor just for the team overall, whether it's the pass game or the pass rush or a lot of the different things. Thought about doing that today, but narrowed it in a little bit more. Maybe I'll broaden it out a little bit more next week. So stay tuned for that. But let's get into some transfer portal updates because the commitments started rolling in. I didn't think I was going to be doing one of these segments today, but then commitments just kept rolling in. I wanted to make sure you guys have all of the updates that you possibly need. We'll roll through this pretty quickly, if I had to imagine, because this is a lot of different players to get through. And we'll start with Hunter Zambrano, the most talented offensive lineman that was in the portal at the time. Interior offensive lineman, really good player from Illinois State. He is making his way down to Lubbock, Texas. He will be a Red Raider next year. He only allowed 7 sacks this year. Very talented kid. Definitely a guy that could be an immediate starter for them. And then you got to figure out the rest of it. Still a lot of offensive line issues for Texas Tech, but this is a big-time step in the right direction. No doubt about that. And it didn't stop there. They kept going down to the FCS level for Cole Wisnowski, very talented player from NDSU, has played so much football, is going to be a huge piece to that defense just to get everyone in place on that back end and possibly be a big-time leader for this team. He is going to be an immediate starter. I'd be very surprised if he wasn't. Very talented player that can play this game very, very instinctually, and I think he'll be a huge piece for that Red Raiders defense in 2025. Jacob Zeno, the quarterback from UAB, has committed to Texas A&M. He is going to be probably a supplemental piece, probably a depth piece behind Marcel Reed, but at the end of the day, I do think Jacob Zeno is a very talented player, so if you are going to get a supplemental piece, if you are going to get a backup piece for Marcel Reed, it's a pretty good one to get. He definitely does fit into what Colin Klein likes to do offensively, a little bit more of a runner than someone like Connor Wegman was, and I have to assume they have one more in the chamber. I think they're probably going to go out and get one more, losing Jalen Henderson as well as Connor Wegman, but we'll see what happens there. Definitely a good time pickup to just be a backup in case of emergency for a guy like Marcel Reed. Then we have the guy that everyone was watching for, Williams Nwaneri, very, very talented player, an absolute beast, number one recruit in the country coming out last year. He committed to Missouri. He is now committed to Nebraska. He went into the portal and he went in with one of those non-contact tags, which means he's found his place. He's going somewhere very, very specific. That place was Nebraska. Huge pickup for the Huskers. Honestly, out of the guys that they just lost, and this guy, he's the most talented of the group. Might not be the most experienced of the group, but from a pure talent perspective, he is absolutely a talent upgrade over a guy like Prince Williman or a couple of the other guys they lost. Now, you lost a number of guys, so you still got replacing to do, no doubt about that, but you're in a position where Nebraska, you got a really, really good prize here, no doubt. Deshaun Womack, another edge rusher that came off the board yesterday, he is going to be an Ole Miss Rebel and never really caught on over there at LSU. Very talented player, definitely a guy that felt like halfway through the year, it felt like things were starting to kind of click, never really got where he wanted it to. He is going to be in Oxford, and it feels like another time where Ole Miss is just heating up. It's going to be a lot more people. I know they're in for Parker Kutas, the very talented offensive lineman from Arkansas. They're in for a lot of guys. And obviously, Ole Miss will be a team we talk about plenty around this segment. No doubt about that. Some other news. Sadir Mitchell, I reported yesterday that it seemed like he was going into the portal. Sounds like he's going to stick around. Sounds like he will be a Texas Longhorn in 2025. According to Horns 247, he has decided to stick around. Huge for the Texas program. They were really losing guys on that defensive line, and being able to keep this guy around that, frankly, I think is going to be probably the best defensive lineman they have next year. Absolutely huge. And still some work to do in the portal, but this is one that they badly wanted to keep on campus, and it looks like they're going to be able to. PJ Woodland is another one that a lot of people seem to have gotten wrong. He actually quote tweeted Pete Thamel when he released the news and said that is not true at all. He is sticking around LSU, which is huge. He is a guy that I frankly think can be an All-American in the future. He could be an All-American next year. He is so talented on the back end of that defense for LSU, and keeping him intact is absolutely huge. And we'll stick with LSU. He might be going up against this guy in practice here in a bit, because Berrien Brown seems to be heading very, very close to committing to Baton Rouge. And if he does, the ability for Garrett Nussmeier to push the ball downfield to this kid, it's going to be special to watch. I can almost promise you that. There's a very, very talented player that just wasn't in the right offense for the last couple of years. He is now, in my opinion, would be in the right offense at LSU. It would be so much fun to watch him in that. Another guy, Eric Singleton, the top transfer on the market right now. It looks like Georgia's starting to wane just a little bit in this one. Obviously, Georgia will have plenty to say towards the end of this, but Ole Miss and Auburn seem to be the ones kind of pulling away, Ole Miss especially. So something to watch there. I think he could be a huge piece to kind of replace someone like Jordan Watkins or really just become the guy. He is an absolute beast, and wherever he ends up, I think he's going to be a star. I think he could be first team All-SEC next year. That's how good this kid is, and that's how much of a difference I think he can make in an offense like Ole Miss especially. Nick Anderson is out there as well, and LSU and A&M seem to be the teams to watch right now. Would be a huge addition to that LSU offense with Aaron Anderson. A&M just needs guys. A&M is going out there trying to get as many guys as they can. They are leading for Micah Hudson right now. That would be a huge piece to add to a guy like Jerome Miles that came in as a freshman. And then you got Nick Anderson. That would be a huge piece as well. So A&M's going to be active. They're going to be in for a lot of these wide receivers. If they're able to lock down a couple of them, then it could be a very fun attack. I don't necessarily know what they're going to change about the scheme around there to get a little bit more of that passing attack involved, but at the end of the day, you got the wide receivers to do it. That's for sure. Kevin Coleman was one that went in the portal yesterday, and a lot of Mississippi State fans were very, very upset about this one because this is an absolute beast, and it looks like he might just have his place picked out in Missouri. It sounds like Missouri might just be winning out for this one. Very talented player, one of those guys that can totally change the way that you go about business offensively, huge after the catch, and definitely will be a huge asset for probably Missouri, but whichever team he ends up on, he will be a huge asset for them. Max Clare is a guy you're going to want to watch. The number one tight end in the portal right now. He is on his way to Austin, Texas, and they badly need a little bit of help at that tight end position with Gunnar Helm walking out the door. This would be the perfect replacement for Gunnar Helm. I don't think Steve Sarkisian's letting him leave without a commitment. I'll be totally honest with you. I think they're going to do everything in their power to make sure this guy is committed by Sunday, and I think Texas probably has the inside track here. I haven't seen any other visits set or anything like that, so I would lean towards Texas really, really keying in on this one this weekend and hopefully locking down this one and getting a replacement for Gunnar Helm for 2025. Fernando Mendoza is the name you're going to want to watch. He is a very talented player and a guy that a lot of people around the industry have said he is an NFL quarterback. He has that upside, he has that ability, and it looks like there's 4 teams to watch here. Georgia, Indiana, UCLA, and Wisconsin. Would be fascinating if he found his way to Georgia because, frankly, I think the kid could start. It would all depend on what happens with Gunnar Stockton over the next little bit, but at the end of the day, he's a very talented player. Obviously, Wisconsin and UCLA, that would be very beneficial for them. I think he'd fit in Indiana. Wouldn't quite fit that offense as much as you would like, but very talented player nonetheless. I think wherever he ends up, he will likely be the immediate starter, and I think this kid's a star. I think he has every ability to take a big-time step forward next year and become one of the big-time starters in college football. Jackson Arnold is still out there, and it's still the same 2 teams. It's Mississippi State and Auburn. Looks like Auburn's given a little bit more of a run than some people assume they would, at least initially. Going to be interesting to see what they can do, and you have him with some of the deep threats that they have. Could be very dangerous. He doesn't quite fit perfectly in that Hugh Freeze offense, and there will be a couple other quarterbacks that will probably fit a little bit better, but this is a very talented kid. Definitely a kid that can open up that offense, and if you have him throwing to Cam Coleman, a lot of really nice things can happen. I can promise you that. And we were talking about with Jackson Arnold, Mississippi State being involved as well. If that does fall through and he does find his way to Auburn, Luke Kromenhoek could be the decision for Mississippi State. They've gotten his attention pretty quickly here, and this would be huge, not only for 2025, but for beyond, and I think that's the way that Mississippi State should be looking at this. I think they should be saying maybe 2025 is not going to be the perfect year for us. If we have a quarterback that we can continue to develop, continue to get better, it's going to be a huge year. It's going to be a year that we can really remember, and then we move forward to 2026, and then we might just have a dude. So I would lean into this one if I was Mississippi State. I would definitely go after this kid, and I think this kid has all the talent in the world. I think he could be a star there if you were able to lock him up this time around. Moving over to Arizona, they got hit in the back end of their defense the last couple of days. Tacario Davis as well as Dalton Johnson are finding their way into the portal, and a lot of different teams to watch here, but Texas is going to be the main one you're going to want to start with. Johnny Nansen, the former defensive coordinator for Arizona, is now the linebacker coach at Texas, and he's going to be in this recruitment. I can almost promise you that. Tacario Davis kind of flirted with the portal last time around, but pulled his name out. I'd be surprised if he did that this time around, and frankly, I'd be a little bit surprised if he didn't end up in Austin, if I'm being totally honest. A lot of those Arizona players that have found their way into the portal either last year or this time around are looking that direction. This is definitely a guy that Texas very badly needs. I would expect them to go pretty much as aggressively as they possibly can to get this kid, and then probably Dalton Johnson as well. Very talented back-end players, and they got a couple of players walking out the door over there in Austin. I would not be surprised at all if Johnny Nansen was on the phone with them right now, frankly. And then also on the back end, Mansour Deline is a very talented player on the back end for Virginia Tech. We'll talk about them here in a second, but Virginia Tech is a team that has had a really tough time in the portal. This is probably the toughest loss they've had. This is an absolute difference maker on that back end, and whoever is able to pick him up with a lot of different people needing some back end players, he's going to be an immediate starter. He is that good. He is an elite player, and definitely a guy that if he ends up in the SEC and the Big Ten, I don't know, but he's going to be a big-time player just about right away for whatever team he ends up on. And then Dabo Swinney has joined the party. It sounds like Clemson is actually hosting someone for a visit. Will Height, a very talented edge rusher from Purdue this weekend. This is a guy that definitely they're going to want to lock up. If they can get him on campus, especially with TJ Parker coming back for his junior year, ooh, buddy, it could be a really, really fun pass attack for Clemson, and it gives you an idea that we're getting closer to Clemson starting to really dip their toe into this thing and get active. They're going to have to get really active here pretty soon because they're going to have a lot of players going off into the NFL, have some talent at wide receiver, but probably need to fill that out a little bit more. So it'll be interesting to see how all this unfolds. And then their counterpart in the ACC, UNC, has already started doing work. A couple of different guys have scheduled some visits, and that thing will heat up very quickly over the weekend. Now let's get into some losers of the portal thus far, and it starts with Oklahoma. They are bleeding right now. They've lost 6 wide receivers to this point. They've lost their top tight end in Bauer Sharp. They've lost a number of offensive linemen and Jackson Arnold. It's all over the place over there in Norman, and they got a lot of work to do. Now, they're more than capable of doing that. They're a very talented coaching staff. They have everything going for them, but I can't imagine this was the plan going into the portal cycle to lose pretty much your top 6 wide receivers. Deion Burks is still there, but he might just be the only guy there. It might just be the Fresh Prince meme in that wide receiver room right about now, if I'm being honest. Then you do have LSU. They've lost a good amount of guys to the portal, particularly on the back end and the D-line. Lost Sage Ryan yesterday, lost JVR Suggs yesterday. So a lot of different things that they're going to have to figure out. I tend to believe that they're going to be more than fine, and some of this is going to be addition by subtraction, if I'm being totally honest. But Jakeem Jackson coming into the fray would be huge. Barry and Brown obviously being a piece of this is going to be massive, but a lot of different moving parts. I think LSU is going to be fine in this grand scheme of things. USC, I can't say the same about. I don't know what's happening over there. They have a lot of different guys that are finding different places to play, including Deuce Robinson, Kyron Hudson, Quentin Joyner, obviously Miller Moss, and a lot of other guys on the defensive side of the ball. So, I don't know. It's going to do or die year for Lincoln Riley over there in LA, and he's got to deliver very quickly. Kentucky has really gotten hit. They're losing just about everything in the portal. Some guys are going off to the NFL draft like Deone Walker and Maxwell Harrison, and then Barry and Brown, Dane Key, Keyshawn Silver, all of these guys are walking out the door to the portal. You got some problems if you're Mark Stoops in a big-time way for 2025. And then Virginia Tech, they've been hit very, very hard over the last little bit, and they got some guys they have to figure out. They obviously had Mansour Deline hit the portal, but then big-time offensive linemen have hit the portal from this program, and a lot of stuff to figure out. After a relatively disappointing year for Virginia Tech, they're going to have to do a little bit of resetting before they can attack 2025. And it's going to be crazy. The transfer portal, I had to make sure you guys were updated going into this weekend because this weekend's going to be fast and furious. We're going to have a lot of different commitments. We're going to have a lot of different moving parts, and we'll probably have a better idea of what UNC looks like around this time on Monday. But let's take our last break here. When we come back, we got to just get into a little bit of a weekend roundup. We'll get into Dan Mullen to USC, Tino Sunseri going over to UCLA, NIU possibly to the Mountain West, and a lot of other things that we'll break down right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the winners and losers from the transfer portal, some commitments, some intel. There's a million things happening around the transfer portal right now, and this weekend I have to assume will be very explosive when it comes to commitments and things of that nature. But let's get into a little bit of a weekend roundup, and there's a lot of different things to get to, but let's wrap this up pretty quickly before we got to get out of the way for my guy Kenneth. So let's get into this, and let's talk about Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen has been hired over there at UNLV. Huge hire for UNLV. I think I could not feel better about this hire, if I'm being totally honest, for a number of different reasons. Obviously, Dan Mullen's a fantastic coach. He did a great job at Mississippi State. He was fired a little bit too early at Florida, if you're asking me. So, very talented coach. Definitely a guy that can totally change what that program is. And then on top of that, he's going to have the NIL. He's going to have the guys behind the scenes that are more than willing to pay the paychecks. And in fact, that seems to be a big-time reason that he was willing to take this job right now, because it looked like he was in a very good position and one of those big-time jobs would open and start calling his name. He decided to go to Vegas, and it's going to be really interesting to watch this one unfold. And one of the other interesting tidbits here is what happens to Brennan Marion, a very talented play caller for them. Does he stick around? And if he does, that offense is going to be about as fun as you've ever seen. Very good offensive minds, and just love seeing Dan Mullen back in the coaching world. Really awesome atmosphere, really awesome personality, and definitely a guy that has plenty of success in the coaching world. I think he's going to be one of those guys that it might just be the hire of the cycle. I cannot wait to see what he can do over there in Vegas, especially with some of the buy-in that he's going to get. He's going to be a very special coach, and it's going to be a very special year in 2025 when we have Rich Rodriguez at UNLV. We have Dan Mullen over at Rich Rodriguez at WVU, Dan Mullen over at UNLV, as well as Bill Belichick at UNC. It doesn't make sense, but I'm absolutely here for it in 2025. Tino Sunseri is the guy I want to talk about here for a second. He is officially going to UCLA to be their new offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. Huge. This is one of the best hires of the entire cycle. Definitely a guy that can get some things done, and he will obviously be around Indiana for the rest of their CFP race. But he's done a great job with these two quarterbacks right here. When Taven Jackson had to come in and play a couple of games, he played incredibly well, and then Curtis Rourke goes without saying, has done an incredible job this year, and he's going to be a guy that can really elevate that offense. I'm not saying UCLA is going to compete for the Big Ten next year. I am saying they have more of an ability to do that. They are a very dangerous team, and they are a team that I'm very closely watching as we head on into this thing. NIU is possibly thinking about going to the Mountain West, and all I have to say is please don't do this. The MAC is very special. Do not break up MACtion. Do not break up what is special about this sport, and it's waning ever so slightly every single day. Keep it alive, NIU. Please keep it alive. Stay in the MAC. Give us the MACtion that we want against the teams that are right next to each other. Just, that's all I got, really. I'm no analysis on this one. No, would it be a good fit? None of that. Stay in the MAC, NIU. Please stay in the MAC. Give us the MAC that we want. Let the Mountain West do the Mountain West thing. They already have the people that they need to be a conference, and according to the NCAA, you're good. Stay in the MAC. Please give us MACtion, and please give us it with NIU in it. I'll leave it at that for the time being. But moving forward, we have a couple of different things in the NFL draft news portion of this. We got Tatoria McMillan. It sounds like he is declared for the draft. Don't know if he's going to play in that bowl game. Definitely something to be watching for over the next little bit. He's a very talented player, obviously, and definitely can make a big-time difference for what this team, for whatever team he gets drafted to. It'll be interesting to see if he plays in that game. I'd be a little bit surprised if he does, but regardless, he will be the first true wide receiver taken off the board. Travis Hunter, obviously, a little bit of a special circumstance, but he will be the guy that a lot of people are looking at, and definitely is going to be a really fun player to watch. Then you do have Garrett Nussmeier. It sounds like he is going to be back for 2025. A very huge news for LSU. Definitely something that they wanted to have happen because they didn't want to go out and have to find their quarterback in all this mess. So they're in a really good position. I think they just got to build people around him. And this kid, if he takes a step forward, if he stops making a couple of the mistakes that he's made throughout the year, he is going to be an absolute monster. He's going to be a dude that you're going to have to worry about, and cannot wait to see what this kid can do. And then Let's get into a couple of the bowl games that are happening this weekend. Wanted to make sure you guys had these on y'all's radar, and we'll start with the Cricket Celebration Bowl between the two HBCU teams in Jackson State and South Carolina State, two very, very successful programs that have been absolutely awesome this year. Jackson State still has plenty of talent from the Dion days, I promise you that. And it starts with Herb Mulligan, very talented running back, 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns on the year. Really, really good player. On the other side of things for South Carolina State, it's all about Eric Phoenix, the quarterback, and I really love that name. But 2,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, 7 picks. This should be a really fun game. This is always a really interesting game between the two teams that won their respective HBCU conferences. Always a really fun celebration over there in Atlanta, about 10 minutes from me down there in Mercedes-Benz, and it's going to be really, really fun to watch. Obviously, would love for both this and Army to have a little bit more of a spotlight on and be kind of on their own day. Don't love that Army-Navy has to share it with a couple of bowl games, but that's the reality of the schedule in December. It's an absolute nightmare, and we got a lot of things to figure out about it. But at the end of the day, this will be a really, really fun game to watch, and will be a nice little appetizer as we head into that Army-Navy game. I will take Jackson State here. I think the talent on that team is absolutely ridiculous. You heard Timothy Chalamet. They got 11 guys in their conference. In their conference first team, very, very talented players, and definitely would lean Jackson State in this one. It'll be a really fun one, but I'll take Jackson State. Then South Alabama and Western Michigan will get on a little bit later in the evening, down there at 9 p.m. on Saturday, and this is a really fun one to me. I love these two teams, really enjoyed watching them throughout the year, kind of for different reasons. Gio Lopez and that South Alabama offense are downright electric. They get after you. They really can push the ball downfield at different times, but Western Michigan, they got the duo of running backs between Jaden Nixon and Jalen Buckley that are just downright elite. They're so much fun to watch running the ball, and definitely are a huge part of that offense. Fluff Bothwell, the star running back for South Alabama, has entered the portal. I doubt he will be on that team. I doubt he will be playing for them. Probably is fielding a lot of offers, and I don't want to say has bigger fish to fry, but has different fish to fry as of right now. So it looks like it's going to be Kentrell Bullock's time to shine, and he's got 700 yards and 6 touchdowns on the year. So he's going to be more than fine, a very special running back in the wings, and definitely a guy to keep an eye out on in 2025 because he's a very fun player, no doubt about that. So this is going to be an awesome game. Definitely will be a little bit of a different kind of battle between two different teams, but the way that I see it, I love this Western Michigan run game. I think they have the ability to make some plays here. I think the not having Fluff Bothwell, even though you do have a very good running back right behind him, I think he's going to struggle just a little bit. I like Western Michigan to win this one. I like them to take the air out of the ball just a little bit here. Jalen Buckley and Jaden Nixon have a big-time day, and them to win this thing. And then I forgot to add the images. I apologize for that, but did want to roll through some of the big-time college football awards that were given out yesterday. Coach of the Year did go to Curt Cignetti. Obviously a very incredible coach this year. Definitely a guy that I had in very, very high esteem. Maybe not ranked quite as high as I probably should have yesterday, but a very, very talented quarterback. I picked Kenny Dillingham as my coach of the year, but razor-thin margins. Has done an incredible, incredible job, and definitely a guy that deserves that recognition. As for AP Player of the Year, Travis Hunter, no doubt about it. And 7 straight Heismans have won this award. Looks like the NYC trip might just be a victory lap for Travis Hunter at this point. I think we all understand that, but this is about the nail in the coffin for what's going to happen on Saturday. Still will be very fun to watch and get all the stories and everything, but we know who's going to win that thing at this point. Cam Ward, the Davey O'Brien Award winner, huge for him. Definitely one of those guys that it wasn't all that tough. You could have gone Shadur Sanders, and I wouldn't necessarily go against you too hard, but Cam Ward was the most impressive quarterback wire to wire this year. He is definitely the guy that I would have as the Davey O'Brien Award winner. The Chuck Bednarik Award winner, the Best Defensive Player of the Year, went to Travis Hunter. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think he's been absolutely incredible, and he deserves a lot of that love. I would have gone in the Kyle Kennard or Abdul Carter direction. Just personally myself, I think Travis Hunter was right behind them, so not necessarily mad about this one, but definitely would have leaned towards one of those two guys up front over Travis Hunter for that one. The Doak Walker Award, I don't even know if I have to say it. It was Ashton Genty. It was a runaway. There's no doubt about that. He is absolutely going to be the guy that gets that. He has some hardware right now. He's going to try to steal a little bit from Travis Hunter and actually tomorrow when this whole thing goes down. The Mackey Award came out. Tyler Warren is going to be the best tight end in the country this year. I think it should have been Harold Fannin. I'll be totally honest. I think he was the most impressive. He was one of the leading receivers in the entire country. He dominated just about every game for Bowling Green, and he was a guy that, even when they were on the field with Tyler Warren, he still looked like the best tight end on the field. So I lean towards Harold Fannin in that one. I understand what Tyler Warren brings to the table. Not mad about that one by any means, but I would have voted for Harold Fannin on that one. The Outland Trophy goes back to Texas. It is going to be Kelvin Banks, and for the life of me, I can't understand why a tackle is getting interior lineman of the year, but that's what we got. That's the way the Outland Trophy works, apparently. But last year was Tavondre Sweat for Texas. This year around, it is going to be Kelvin Banks, and he will be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. Been absolutely remarkable, and also won the Lombardi Award for the best offensive lineman in the country. He was incredible all year. He is going to be a top 5 draft pick, no doubt in my mind. Also for Texas, the Jim Thorpe Award is back in Austin for, I believe, the most times in history, if I'm not mistaken. Jahdae Barron wins that one. To me, it was a layup. I don't think anyone else was really all that close. You could argue Travis Hunter. You could argue Noah Williams. Neither of those guys were finalists for this thing. So Jahdae Barron, I think, ran away with this one, and good on him. Kind of bet on himself, came back to school, and now he's probably a first-round pick this time in April. And then the Biletnikoff went to Travis Hunter, another one that I don't fully agree on. I think when you have a Triple Crown winner in Nick Nash, I lean that direction 10 times out of 10. I understand the argument of the talent gap between the two. I get that, and I'm not necessarily pushing against this one by any means. I would have gone Nick Nash's direction. That's the person I gave it to earlier in the week. So it's definitely a battle back and forth. All these wide receivers were incredible. They could have given it to T-Mac, and I would have been more than fine with that as well. But as of right now, I would have gone Nick Nash for the Biletnikoff, but all those guys, huge congratulations. Been incredible years for all those guys, and definitely some more incredible years to come for them in the NFL, or maybe back in college football for some of those. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have great people covering every sport you could possibly want, so anything in the world of sports, we got you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening. I will be back next week to break down Bill Belichick, to break down the portal, to break down all of the craziness as we get into the CFP week. So I will see you then.